This is the last in our series of National Network Strategy Conversations that we've been hosting for the past year to inform a new strategic plan for Transition US, which we hope to share with you all before or during our national gathering, the Regenerative Community Summit that's coming up in September and October. We have some folks here tonight who are helping plan that event. Rua is one of the coordinators. We're really excited about that. So the next 2 months, July and August, we're still going to be meeting on the third Tuesday of the month at the same time, but those calls are going to be focused on the national gathering. The July call will be focused on how local groups can leverage the gathering to re-inspire, catalyze, grow their local groups, and we'll give you a preview of the content. And then August is going to be focused on regional hub development to prepare for the bioregional breakouts that will be happening during the national gathering, the Regenerative Community Summit. So I really want to thank you all for being here. And I know some of you have been to many of these and really appreciate all of your input. And Dawn just started recording this. We feature the recordings along with a summary of every session on our website, and we are harvesting the insights from these calls to feed into our strategic plan. So the topic tonight is on coalition building and strategic partnerships, another one of those key themes that comes up over and over again when we think and talk strategically about how to grow the transition movement. A quick reminder about Zoom etiquette. You can just mute yourself when you're not talking. We will have breakout groups and a full group discussion harvest round later, so everyone will get a chance to participate. And yeah, if you don't want to be filmed, you can just turn off your camera. You could even change your name. There's this little view feature on the upper right hand corner, so you can control whether you're seeing everyone in the gallery view or if you have a bigger picture of the speaker. Dawn, is there anything I'm missing on that before I hand it over to you? Dawn's going to lead us in a grounding and then take us into a presentation with some background on this topic.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So something we do at a lot of our staff meetings, some of you might do it at your transition meeting, is just to take some time to get grounded to start. This can be helpful if we've had a busy or stressful day, just to come here, be fully present. So if you just take a moment to breathe with me, it can help to take good posture. One that's comfortable but upright, feet firmly connected with the floor, gives us a feeling of groundedness or rootedness in our place, in our body. And we can have our eyes open or closed and just start to tune into our breathing. Of course, we don't have to do anything with our breathing. It just happens automatically, so we can just sense it as it comes in to our body, goes out to all our trillions of cells. And as we naturally release back into the space in a perfect reciprocity. And we could just do a brief scan of our body for any sites of tension that might be there. And you can just recognize them and allow them to relax, to melt away. We don't have to hold on to anything. And that also goes for the thoughts in our mind. So you sense some tension there, some busyness, even some chaos. We can just allow that to relax, melt, release, let go. So just taking a couple more breaths. You might want to just reflect to yourself your intention for being here tonight, or this afternoon, as the case may be. If you have your eyes closed, you could slowly open them, come back into the space. Bring us all together here. So, yeah, thank you all for being here. My name is Don Hall. I see some new names, new faces, which is great. I'm the Executive Director of Transition US, and I'm going to be sharing with you a few thoughts on our topic today of coalitions and partnerships to get us started. And then, as Marissa said, we'll have some time to go in breakout groups and have discussions with each other on this topic. I'm going to share my screen. Just a reminder that if you're not speaking actively, you can mute yourself. If you do need to ask a question at any point, feel free to raise your hand this way, the old-fashioned way, or you could type into the chat, or you can use the reactions in your Zoom toolbar. I may not see you, so maybe Marissa, if you could look out for folks. Right. And I'm going to try to be brief. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about coalition building and strategic partnerships, but did want to start off looking at this whole national network strategy conversation series that we've been in. For those of you who joined late, Marissa had mentioned that this is actually the last call in a series of 12 that's currently scheduled. We're going to have a couple coming up on the national gathering, but this kind of set is ending tonight. I wanted to look back briefly at where we've been and where we're going, what we're going to do with all of this great input that we've gotten. So the journey so far actually began with our board of directors making a request of us as staff at Transition US to go about creating a new strategic plan. And we knew that we wanted this strategic plan to be really thoroughly informed by the grassroots movement, by the whole movement of movements. So we started out about 18 months ago surveying and interviewing 60 key stakeholders in our movement. And Marissa put together a 25-page summary of the findings from those surveys and interviews. And out of that paper came a number of emerging themes, and that's what we've been doing here in these national network strategy conversations. So we started out with deepening our analysis, connecting the dots between social justice, the extractive economy, and ecological crises. We had a session on communications, messaging, and storytelling, strengthening the grassroots transition network, resourcing our movement, building capacity and increasing impact, power leadership and healthy movement culture, deepening inner resilience, youth leadership and intergenerational collaboration, deepening our analysis part 2 on a power analysis, session on local government collaboration, session on emergency preparedness and disaster response, and that brings us to tonight. So we've covered a tremendous amount of ground here, and I've been very grateful to be part of all these conversations, and hope that you all who have been coming for many months have enjoyed them too. So now, in terms of the journey ahead, it's our job to take all of this massive input and feedback and good ideas, suggestions, recommendations, and turn it into an actionable plan. So what we're going to be doing over the next several months, extracting key points from the strategic planning input paper that Marissa put together, the reports from each of these conversations. I think you can find the first 10 or 11 on our website under news. Our notes from board strategy meetings we've been having over the past 18 months, and other related documents like a 20-page paper that I drafted in early of last year. So we're going to take those key points and then try to turn them into actionable steps and prioritize them in a way that fits with our current capacity and efforts to expand our capacity as an organization and movement. We will complete a draft plan, share it with National Collaborative Design Council and our board of directors for additional feedback one last time before presenting to the board for final approval in time to release it publicly around our Regenerative Community Summit in September. So this is the kind of roadmap. We're not going to stop having these kind of conversations, but we're kind of ending one chapter and beginning another one. So I thought you might appreciate kind of knowing where this is all going and just appreciating all that you've brought to it over the past year plus. So tonight's topic, coalition building and strategic partnerships. We've traditionally started these sessions by sharing a little bit from that strategy input paper. And we really haven't received a lot of feedback on partnerships yet. We didn't through those surveys and interviews. There's a small section on page 14 or 13, page 13 that you might want to look at maybe after this call if you haven't yet. But two quotes stood out to me from it. One is from Marissa, kind of summarizing all the input that we got on this topic, which said there was strong support for the need to encourage collaboration and to partner with other allied organizations at the local, regional, and national levels. The rationale is both to raise the visibility of transition as well as to complement the protest orientation of many climate groups with transition's positive solutions-oriented approach. So I don't think that this probably comes as news to anybody who's been involved with the transition movement for long. This is something that we do and always can do more and do better. The second quote came from one of the participants in the interviews, surveys. And this person said, I was on a call with Rob Hopkins and a woman said, our area has so many volunteer groups I can't get them to pay attention to transition. Rob said, it's not mandatory. Yes, be independent with the transition brand, but be collaboratory. And I think that this quote brings up a kind of central question to this topic of partnership, which I now want to dive into a little bit. Many of you who are involved with transition in the early days know that we developed a lot of jargon. We had transition towns, we had transition initiatives, transition universities, transition congregations, transition streets, transition trainers, transition training. This goes on and on. We even called ourselves transitioners and used funny sounding terms like the great unleashing and the great reskilling. And my feeling is that this was probably very useful at that point in our development, to have some kind of feeling of cohesiveness to our fledgling transition culture. But now it's become somewhat self-limiting, in that many people continue to see, despite our best efforts, despite saying that any group can become a transition initiative, you don't even have to call yourself transition, anybody can consider themselves a transitioner as part of this movement, don't have to be part of an official group, that a lot of people still see transition as a kind of insular world, some kind of club that they don't belong to. And so I think we need to ask ourselves, like, how can we take down that kind of artificial boundary between what is transition and what is, this larger kind of unnamed movement for social justice and sustainability around the world. I think both things are valuable. Having a kind of common identity, a recognizable brand is important, but also to have that boundary between what is transition and what isn't be as porous as possible, so that people can really see themselves in this movement. So what might that look like? What might that shift look like? Well, it may not be that dramatic. This is just one recent example that I was involved in. So we took the training that had previously been called Transition Launch, or Training for Transition, been taught hundreds of times around the world, and we just renamed it Regenerative Leadership for Social Change this past year. And the intention in doing that was that we realized that this training, although it came out of the transition movement, was valuable to people doing social change work, no matter what they call it. That these are basic community organizing skills that could be valuable to a much wider audience than just members of official transition initiatives. So we renamed it, and partially as a result, we had our largest ever online training. We had 115 participants sign up from all over the world for a 16-week course, and probably half of them were not affiliated with any transition initiative. So just even making kind of slight shifts like this to be a little bit more open, I think could really help us at this moment as a movement, not being so attached to the brand all the time. So that was one point that I wanted to make. Got a couple others. Looking at partnership in transition. This really is, partnership is really part of the transition DNA from the very beginning. These are the so-called 8 principles of transition. And you can see the highlighted ones, at least 3 of these relate directly to some kind of openness, partnership, collaboration, promoting inclusivity and social justice, freely sharing ideas and power, collaborating and looking for synergies. So, you know, the principle about inclusivity and social justice is not that unique. Lots of organizations have that in their founding documents, but freely sharing ideas and power and collaborating and look for synergies, not every organization has that. And we have that stated right up front in transition, that that's an integral part of who we are. And it's been said since the beginning of this movement that we hope to inspire an unprecedented coming together of society, because that's what we need to actually change the world. So, you know, that doesn't just include this kind of traditional diagram of the sectors of society with politics, economics, and social systems, but also, you know, we need to think about media, funders, individuals, families, and communities from all walks of life. So we are trying to reach everybody. We are trying to bring everybody along, because we can't do this with just, you know, a small group of very progressively minded people. But we can't do it all at once. Anybody who's done transition for any length of time knows that, you know, we run into capacity issues. You know, it takes time to build relationships. It takes time to reach out and communicate with different groups. So how do we prioritize and strategize around what kinds of partnerships to pursue at what time? And I think, you know, diffusion of innovations theory has been very helpful for my thinking about this. If you're not familiar, you know, I think most people aren't. So it's basically saying that any innovation that successfully spreads throughout all of society, whether it be some kind of practice, process, or product, follows a generally similar pattern. That it starts off with innovators, kind of cultural creative types that latch on to some kind of new innovation and start promoting it. And a lot of our work at Transition US is directed towards innovators, people like us, you know, who've started transition initiatives or gotten on board in the early days. And also reaching out to early adopters, folks that, you know, are very sympathetic with the idea of transition. Maybe they're not as involved as the innovators, but, you know, are very open and receptive to our message. And then a big step is, you know, how do we start to bring in the early majority? Because kind of the holy grail of all of this is the so-called tipping point, you know, that point of critical mass or momentum where things just start to really take off. And there's a number of different estimates of where the tipping point might lie, but the most persuasive number that I've seen is 25%. So we're talking about somewhere halfway in the early majority. So most of us are probably looking in this, and I think that it's important to recognize that, you know, if we can get enough innovators, early adopters, early majority, then the late majority tends to be a kind of following group. They'll come along. And the laggards, we don't want to waste too much time with them right now, because they're going to be the most difficult ones to convince. But we can start where we are, build momentum for a kind of critical mass tipping point. And that's what we're aiming for, I think. All right, so that brings us to this map. Now, you may not be able to read everything on the map. It's really not the point of why I'm showing it to you. The point is to encourage this kind of thinking, however you do it, you know, not necessarily doing it in this exact way. There's lots of different ways to do community mapping that you can find on the internet. You could come up with a system for yourself, or you could use something like this. This is what we did for potential partners for our Regenerative Community Summit that's coming up this fall. So we had a session where we brainstormed a bunch of 40 or 50 partners. And then we sorted them in 3 different ways. One according to scope, so regional organizations, national organizations, and global organizations, so that we have a good kind of distribution of that. We're kind of aware of what scale our partners are working at. We sorted them according to topic: food, energy, economy, climate, effective collaboration or interpersonal skills, inner transition, kind of more general approach, to see, do we have kind of an even distribution there? Do we have a good diversity of partners in that way? And then the third way we sorted, which is the color coding, is whether we have a strong connection currently with that organization. We have some connection or we have no connection currently. And that really helped us to look at who we should focus on, and who we know that we need a little bit of work to cultivate those relationships, to get them to the point where they are likely to want to partner with us, and who we probably shouldn't waste time on at this point. So this is a kind of exercise that you could do with your local initiative if you haven't already. We're going to be doing something like this tonight, not quite so elaborate. All right, just a few more slides. So tips for cultivating strong partnerships. Just wanted to put together a short list for you, mostly drawn from our various trainings. Some from my own observations. And I found these things to be really helpful. To first seek to understand, do your homework, research the organization, get to know them, their mission, their needs, their current interests, go to their meetings and events, really try to understand where they're coming from before trying to engage a partnership. Cultivate personal relationships. We know that relationships make the world go round. And in my experience, you're unlikely to get in the door without them. You're just some kind of nameless, faceless organization. Be humble. Don't assume that you have all the answers or doing the other group a favor. We could say this differently, like decolonize your approach to partnership. Create a value proposition. Every partnership that we enter into, we want to be mutually beneficial. So think about what you're able to offer, whether that's something very specific and concrete, or it's something very kind of abstract, like exposure, experience, connections, things like that, that would be valuable to your potential partner, to offer that. And be clear about what you're asking for. For example, don't invite input into a project if you don't intend to take it seriously. There's nothing worse than working with an organization for months and months and months. Oh, we value your input so much. And then at the end, there's nothing in there, coming from you. So let's not do that to others. Let's be straight with them. And this last slide here connects with that last point, which is that there's a whole spectrum of collaboration. Sometimes we use that word collaboration imprecisely to refer to any kind of partnership. I do it as well. No judgment, but there's many different ways that we can interact with others. And what you see on this collaboration spectrum is, on the far left side, competition, which is often the default for our society. We try to avoid that in transition. But then there's this whole range between coexistence and total integration. And you know, that kind of deep dive, long-term collaboration is wonderful, but it also consumes a lot of resources, a lot of time and energy. So, you know, I think that, you know, every group should have some collaborations like that that are very, very deep and very long lasting. But, you know, we can't do that with every organization. So there's a lot in between that we can do. And it's perfectly fine to establish a relationship of just kind of information sharing, working on a project together, um, you know, delegating a piece of a project to an organization that has expertise. Every collaboration doesn't need to be a deep dive full integration. Right, so hopefully that gave you some good grist for the mill, some food for thought. And we're going to now move into having some discussions amongst ourselves. I'll turn it back to Marissa for that.
Thanks, Don. I think we're a little ahead of schedule, so I wanted to just open up time if anyone has a question for Don or wants to respond to that presentation. So maybe we could just end screen share for a moment and do a few minutes of discussion if any wants to happen before we move into the breakouts. All right, I see Rua has her hand up, and then feel free to write stack in the chat, or put your question in the chat if you want to get in line, if you will. Over to you, Rua.
Yeah, I thought the slides were really amazing and clear, and I'd love to have that copy for my transition initiative to show them this, because they're not on this call. So is that going to be available? Great.
Yeah, we can totally make that available. Yeah, maybe we can send an email to everybody who registered.
Wonderful, thank you.
Jenny? Oh, you're muted, Jenny. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute. Lost your camera, still muted. There's a little microphone on the bottom left of your.
There we go. Is that better? Okay.
Yes, now we can hear.
Could you give me a concrete example of a partnership that you are aware of that a transition initiative made with what kind of partnership you're talking about? An example of that, please.
Yeah, I mean, can give tons of examples. I'll give one, and then maybe other folks want to give some from their initiatives. So every year, the local transition initiative that I helped to start, Transition Sarasota, does an annual Eat Local Week. And really our design was to help to weave the local food movement together, that we really observed that there were a lot of amazing things happening in our community around local food, but the dots weren't being connected. They were mostly functioning in isolation from each other. And so we created this annual week-long event, and Transition Sarasota as the convener. We would just, help to facilitate the meetings of different partners that were involved. We would help to set a theme. We would provide the graphics and the promotion and all of that. Help to take all the events and put them into a coherent schedule. But the individual groups each plan their own events. And so it wasn't like we were creating the entire program together, because that would have been a very long process. With typically we have 24 different organizations, local governments, restaurants, farmers markets, farmers, value-added producers, other nonprofit organizations, schools, universities. But we delegated the creation of the events to each of the partners, and we just helped put it together in a big schedule. And I think that's something that transition has a kind of unique talent for, in a way, that kind of weaving together work. You know, because we're a kind of holistic, collaborative-minded movement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. I see John Duval's hand up, and I also posted in the chat. I wonder if any of the local TIs that I know, like Humboldt and Media, Berkeley, you all have some really interesting partnerships, and David posted a little bit in the chat, but if any of you would like to share, I invite that, or other folks who are burning to share their exciting presentations. And we have, okay, I'm gonna call on Andrew first. Andrew's in a partnership with Cooperation Humboldt, and he will go ahead and yeah, tell us about that, Andrew.
Yeah, so this kind of started out through COVID, and when I took, so I'm the disaster program manager for the Red Cross in Humboldt, Belmont, and Trinity counties. And getting here in the midst of COVID, like taking on the position in the midst of COVID and trying to understand the ecosystem of who's out there, who's doing the good work. And my team was incredibly small, and reaching out to, being introduced to from another one of, I believe, an affiliated organization, going, oh, you've got to reach out to Cooperation Humboldt. And meeting David and his team, for one, I kind of felt I found a bunch of kindred spirits as well, and that's more on a personal level than an organizational level. But that relationship grew, and as Cooperation Humboldt acceptance of the Red Cross's stance on, say, the extreme lack of political activity for obvious reasons, being a very neutral nonprofit, however, has really supported our service delivery and disaster response to the point where last year's wildfire season and the community's response to it could not have happened without the support of Cooperation Humboldt, and really some of their leaders stepping up and running volunteer coordination. And so that volunteer management aspect was an amazing benefit to the community, and freed up some Red Crossers. We needed it, I needed shelters, and it led to me actually attending this and just kind of absorbing everything that I can. And I think there's a lot of things that there's really interesting parallels as to what I'm hearing here, and some initial conversations I'm starting to hear from our national leadership. And I won't belabor it any further. I'm sure in the breakouts we'll get into this a little bit further, but it's been an amazing relationship, and I'm so glad that it's happened. And the other thing is the connectivity to organizations that the Red Cross traditionally does not associate with for various reasons, for better or worse, and I'll leave that where that lies. That proximity has ensured that we are reaching a broader group of broader members of our community that we aren't trusted around. And I can't say enough good things about this process. So thank you for everything. Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, I see Shari's hand up. I think we have time for maybe one or two more shares about partners, and I'll try to make time to get to your comment, John, before we move into breakouts. Over to you, Shari.
Yeah, I'll just be really brief. We've had a very good collaboration with our local government, the Media Borough government. Early on in our transition to media, we collaborated with the Environmental Advisory Council, which is an advisory group that reports to the Borough Council. And we've done all kinds of things together with them. I go to all their meetings once, every month. And we've done some events in combination, and we also brought, various things to them, like a student who wanted to do an ecological footprint of the town. And we, brought him to the Environmental Advisory Council to work with them on that. So it's been a great collaboration along the years. The most recent thing that we've done together over the last 4 years is we worked on a composting program that where we started with a pilot program of 100 people in the borough who got weekly kitchen scrap pickups from a local composting company that we partnered with. And we worked with the Environmental Advisory Council on that project over the last 4 years to to research what was involved in getting a borough-wide composting program. We went through the 100-person pilot and expanded it to 200 the next year. And as of July 7th, we're going to be having a borough-wide pickup of food scraps and yard waste to be composted at a local farm, picked up by the borough's Public Works Committee. So it was a pretty exciting project that we worked on with the borough. So we're pretty excited about that.
Great.
That is really exciting, Shari. I wonder if you want to say anything about the collaboration around the Chester incinerator, and if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, another project we took on was we have a city about 10 miles from us called Chester, which is a predominantly Black, lower income community, and they have been plagued by all kinds of environmental injustice issues, including a trash to steam incinerator that's in a residential neighborhood and has been affecting the health of the local residents. All of the trash from our county and other counties, and even some from New York and so on, go to this incinerator to be burned. And we partnered with the local group there to help write up zero waste resolutions for the surrounding county municipalities in our county, and trying to encourage our county council to stop sending trash to this incinerator in hopes of shutting it down eventually. So we've been working on that for a few months too.
Thank you.
That's great.
Very inspiring. Bonnie?
Sure. Yeah, we've been doing a lot lately with our community groups, but one thing I'll mention probably the most collaborative was Mobilize Berkeley, where we partnered with the Cal Students Environmental Resource Center, Green the Church. There were Black ministries in our neighborhood, NorCal Resilience Network, and we did some healing circles. This was after the fires and actually power outages, and just discussed how people felt about that. So I think that was really successful. We did a couple events. First one in person before COVID, and then a couple more online. So another thing we've done, we collaborate with the Berkeley Unified School District to do a repair training. We trained high school students, a small group in repair skills with using local repair people to teach that. And then the last one was partnering with the park or city parks to install pollinator gardens. And that's going really well. People are getting very excited about that.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a good year for collaborations.
And thank you for asking that question, Jenny. I think it was really nice for us to open up the space to hear from everyone who's doing this work. John, do you want to bring your point in before we move
Yeah,
on?
yeah, sure. I can be very brief. Sometimes the failures are more instructive than the successes. And what several years ago, a group of us that grew out of Post Carbon Institute that were focused on peak oil tried to collaborate with an already existing group in San Rafael called Sustainable San Rafael, and they were focused on climate change. And we had 2 or 3 meetings between these two groups, and we really didn't get anywhere, partly because this already established group seemed to regard us as some sort of a threat, as competition rather than collaboration. And also because we were coming from sort of different issue orientations, and we couldn't quite bridge that gap. So yeah, I suppose if there's a moral to the story, it's that you really, when you're networking with other people, you really do have to frame things in sort of win-win, sort of association, so that nobody's that you don't get into these competitive situations where everybody kind of tries to keep your eye on the ball and network. I mean, networking is like my word for everything. It's like you really do have to network with all the important stakeholders on any sort of issue, whether it be in education or government or wherever, so that you can really move forward as a group rather than as a bunch of isolated individual groups. So that was what I wanted to contribute. Thanks, Marissa.
All right, Don, over to you. And if you could also share those breakout questions again.
Oh yeah, I'll put those up. I just wanted to make a comment. Failure triggered a light bulb for me. I agree totally, John, that we often learn more from our mistakes than from our successes. They at least show us that we have more to learn. And something that one of my main points about partnership that wasn't in the presentation, but I say it in pretty much every training when I'm talking about partnership, is that, in the very early days of Transition Sarasota, reached out to a lot of different organizations in the community that had no interest in partnering with us. I was like, come on, we're trying to do such a good thing. Why are these groups giving us the cold shoulder? And I found that as soon as we started having a real impact, that we started having a track record, some credibility in the community, getting a reputation for doing good work that makes people's lives better, these groups turned around and started asking us if they could collaborate. So I think that's an important lesson. Don't necessarily just blame, oh, nobody cares. We have to kind of earn people's trust. Yeah, trust, credibility, and humility, for sure. Yeah. So put up those breakout questions again. It looks like Rua has something she wants to say, maybe while I'm doing that.
Just, yeah, really briefly. So one way that you can collaborate, and we're doing that in Sustainable Charlotte, and we've done that all along, is our board is made up of people from a variety of organizations in the community. The library director, the energy committee, the conservation commission, the congregational church, they're all represented on our board. And so the collaborations become very natural then, because we're doing it together.
Thank you.
That's a great point. Yeah, and we'll have lots more time to share with each other, both in the breakouts. We'll have a little time when we come back, I think, to share the highlights. But here are the questions. I assume you're seeing that now.
Yeah, so first question is, who do you think Transition US should be partnering with at local, regional, national, and global levels to best advance our movement? Why? And what might we ask them to partner on? And then the second question is, what are some of the most valuable partnerships your group has been engaged in? We've heard a little bit from some of you now about this. What made them especially valuable and how did they come about?